Is Nigma back? Are they doing it? Are they gonna be at TI this year? What?
I'm gonna press X to doubt on this one, unfortunately.
Alrighty then, Avery, we've got another episode of Not for Broadcast. We have some tournaments that are currently going on. They're very interesting, very good stuff, but nobody really cares about the tournaments. What the people really want to know, Avery, is Nigma back? Are they doing it? Are they gonna be at TI this year? What's going on with Nigma? Holy crap, they're winning Dota games.
All right, before we continue, let's talk about today's sponsor, Battlesmith. It's a fresh take on RPGs, blending crafting with strategic combat and captivating story. You'll forge powerful gear, outfit your team, and lead your custom-built squad into battle. Managing a fantasy workshop and fielding heroes, that sounds familiar to us Dota players, right?
And if you're looking for a game to fill those queue times or cool down after an intense pub match, Battlesmiths is your perfect companion. What sets it apart is its depth. You need to carefully consider classes and their gear, unit placement, and when to use consumables. And the best part is that you can make meaningful progress in short bursts, which is perfect for those in-between match moments. Plus, Battlesmiths is not just about solo play. You can reign supreme in online PvP as well.
So there it is. Join Battlesmiths on Android, iOS, Mac, and PC to hammer out your destiny. And for our viewers, use code TundraCraft for an exclusive starter pack. Thank you, Battlesmiths, for sponsoring our show, and let's get back to it.
How can they go to TI?
I don't know. Maybe some team forfeits and just gives up their spot to a superior team.
I mean, last time I checked, you can't spell Nigma with OG, so they're not going to be able to finagle their way into a tournament last minute here.
I see. Okay. Wow.
Are they back? No, they're not. But, you can enjoy some wins while they're making something happen with a couple stand-ins and all the old bullshit's gone for a little bit and these guys are renewed and, finding some momentum. It's fun to watch. Are they back? No. This is not a long-term change I think we'll ever go through, so I'm going to press X to doubt on this one, unfortunately.
Well, that was disappointing. That was anticlimactic. What
do you want me to say, man? You want me
they
to lie
went
to
3-1. They beat good teams. They beat Extreme. They beat Azure Ray.
Did they?
They beat Talon.
Azure Ray's not even a team, dude. Okay, let's stop there. They're not even a team. I hate to say it, but they're not even a team. They're watching Twitch streams. They're not even in this tournament. Eliminated themselves. XG, I mean, honestly, this team's all over the place. I feel like they're not even trying in half these events. I don't know what their deal is. They're just like, I'll make care of the game. He doesn't care of the game. Okay. Lost to Jack Chen. I mean, I don't even need to say anything about that. Obviously, you're not going to beat Jack Chen.
But they took a game. It was a 2-1. They took a game
off
of G2IG.
You take a game, but that's about all you're going to do versus that guy. And they beat Talon, who, I don't know results they've had internationally. And also some of these series were close. They are not back, Austin. But they're winning some games, so that's kind of hype. And Sumail's going ham. Sumail's had some pretty good games. I'll give it to him.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Because we are currently talking right now as Lima, the Elite League Season 2, as well as Clavision Snow Rui. The tournament that's going on in Lima and the tournament that's going on in China at the same time. They are both concluded with their group stage, and we will have the playoffs. I believe the Lima has a one-day break, but the playoffs for the snow tournament there's no break there, so that'll be happening tomorrow. So we shall see whether or not Avery's skepticism plays out, because Nigma Galaxy did do well enough. They did not top out their group, but they got second within their group. They got a score of 3-1, but their head-to-head against G2IG meant that they do not get the... They start in the upper bracket, but they don't start in the second round of the upper bracket. I'm sure Priscilla will show the playoffs for you guys and how it all starts. So both Team Spirit and G2IG, who topped out their group, get to be able to jump one spot ahead. But Nigma Galaxy is going to be starting the upper bracket. They're going to be playing against LGD. which is another Chinese team, which they've been beating most of the Chinese teams, not G2IG, but they beat the other ones. So they're probably favored there, right, Avery?
Yeah, I think they're a little favored.
All right, we're
55-45.
going to get an upper bracket.
I'll give it to 'em.
Upper bracket win. Nigma Galaxy. That means they get to play against Team Spirit.
I don't know. Well, yeah, they're going to get demolished. I mean, Team Spirit's back. That's who's really back. Team Spirit's back. You know, they had a rough
Did they ever
EWC.
leave? Did they ever leave?
Look. They had a rough EWC. Okay, Act of God came in. I don't know what happened. Force majeure. Something. They probably all had the flu or some shit. I think Yatoro got ran over by a golf cart. His wrist got broken. That was just, you got lucky at EWC, kids, okay? That's all I'm going to say. Kids out there be getting lucky. But lightning sometimes strikes more than twice, Austin, and it's going to happen. They're going to win TI. I'm calling it now. Before you even ask for predictions, Team Spirit's going to win TI. It's happening. It's going to be the three-time champs right here. Calling it now. And
so can you tell me what, since you have been studying Team Spirits and watching every single one of their games, can you tell me what exactly you saw in their series against Virtus Pro that inspired you?
No, I don't need to tell you that, Austin. What I can tell you is that the meta is very unfavorable for them right now.
Okay.
So the only thing you have to ask is there going to be a balance patch before TI?
I believe so. There's usually a
I rest my case. That's it.
Patch.
That's it. They're going to win because they're going to benefit the most from the patch. They're the best team that isn't as dependent on the patch. Liquid and Gaiman, they're gone. They're gone. The second Underlord gets like minus 5% Firestorm damage, Gaiman's out of there. The second that Pangolier has like minus 10% shield, crash shield, the niche is completely irrelevant. So those two teams are fucking done. And who's left? Chinese teams are scrambling.
Falcons.
They're fumbling. Half are disbanded. Nigma isn't in TI. They're not going to stand in their way.
Falcons.
And Falcons, yeah. But are Falcons going to beat Spirit in a BO3 or BO5 at TI? Again, I go back to I favor Team Spirit. So it's locked and loaded. I'm locking it in now. A month ahead of time. Copenhagen. It's close to home turf. Easy.
Close to home turf.
Easy.
All right. Well, we will obviously, if we do get a patch, which I think many people assume we will, not a big patch, just small little tweaks.
Mega patch. I heard.
Small little tweaks.
Mega bounce patch.
Little patch. Little tiny patch. Nothing major. No new heroes. Don't listen to Avery. When we get that, we will obviously talk about it, and we'll see whether or not we will agree that it is favorable for Team Spirit in that regard.
I mean, it is. Let's just agree now.
Other than that, there was another group that did not have Nigma Galaxy in it. I don't know if anybody cares about the other group. Team Spirit is doing well in it, so I guess that's really the only thing that matters. Navi, LGD, I mean, you guys could see the rest of the teams that are in the playoffs. There's also Elite League that's going on. I have been streaming that one. Avery has refused to join me in that one. Just finished up the second group stage. True.
That's true.
Avery has refused to join me for any of that.
True.
The second group stage has finished up, which I must just make a note here. I'm already tired of double group stages. This is tournaments. Let's not continue this trend, all right? Especially if the one of the group stages does not have an elimination. If it does not have any elimination to it, definitely don't like that. Definitely do not like that. But the second group stage is a round robin best of 3 that just concluded, and that puts OG 1 win, Nouns, Team Liquid as the teams are going to be starting the upper bracket, and we've got Boom.
You know what this means, Austin? You know what this is? This motion?
You mean like the honk the horn?
No, with the hand like this.
No.
You know what that motion is, Austin?
No, I don't know what that is.
That's called milking it, Austin. Let me tell you, these group stages are milking it right now with the viewers, okay? They are just draining that out. They are milking some viewer hours, I'll tell you that much. Ain't nobody want to watch this many group stages. I mean, if you have a LAN, I think it's one thing. Like if it culminates in in-person LAN, I think it's a little more justifiable because then it's like you're running an online league into a LAN. It's a build-up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these purely online leagues that are just like, it's too many. Come on, man. I know they flew these guys out to ESB, but I don't even understand that. Like, they're flying them out, but there is no crowd, but it's like a pseudo land, but it's not really. I don't know what the hell they're doing, honestly. It's one of the
I
most
assume there's a crowd for
formats.
the playoffs. I assume there's a crowd for the final 3 days.
Is there, dude? I didn't see anything about a crowd. Maybe it's going to be like 10 people, or I don't know. Maybe there's a massive crowd. I have no idea, but it doesn't feel like it. So I don't know what's going on with that, but I did watch a lot of the games. A lot of interesting stuff.
Anybody stand out for you?
I think Nouns, like, what is with this Noun squad, dude? Like, they
know,
look
man.
good, but
They almost
you can't
lost.
believe
They
it.
almost lost in the first group stage. They almost got
I know,
eliminated.
but you like, they're like good enough that you're like, I can see it, you know? And they actually, I kind of believe in their players more than I used to. Like, I think Copy consistently looks better and better.
Yep.
I think he's actually the most standout player to me. I think at the start, it was like the supports. You know, you have these super veteran supports. I think Lelis is still really good. Flies, very consistent. So I was like, okay, they're going to carry the team. But the more I watch him, I feel like it's actually more dependent on Copy. Gunner's like a wild card. Sometimes he overperforms, sometimes he underperforms. And Yuma's kind of solid. But I don't know, man. Like, I just can't see his team getting higher than like that top 8 area. I just don't. The ceiling just isn't high enough for me. And I don't know how you improve that. Maybe the team just needs to play around Copy more and like try and snowball him, play around his like cheese heroes and give him later picks and stuff. And I think maybe that ceiling goes up, but there's like too many throws. The team's just too throwy. They throw too many games. There's too many mistakes down the line. If they eliminated that, the ceiling would also go up, but I don't know. So I have a hard time believing in them. I think Liquid has actually looked pretty good considering it. They're clearly like experimenting with some stuff and half trying some of these games and probably burnt out from playing for like 3 months in a row. I think they actually still look pretty good at all that in consideration. And obviously they found something that gels with 33 during EWC. So my Liquid stocks have gone up in the last month for sure. I think a month ago, I probably would have had them on the outskirts of like a top 6 or top 8 at TI. I think now you got them in the top 6 for sure, unless something goes wrong.
Sure.
So they figured out something real fast. So props to them. You know, even though they had like the game end final and stuff, I think if you've been watching this team, they've clearly figured a lot more out and they're able to pull out games a lot more consistently. Even if the drafts are more all over the place at this tournament, they don't have blitz and stuff. So yeah, I think their stocks have gone up for me, which is kind of weird. It's like, I think it's rare you watch a team maybe perform worse than they were at the previous tournament, but it goes up in terms of like, I'm seeing more of it coming together.
It's just purely because of her hero versatility. Like because they don't have blitz, their drafting is different and they're doing different things. And like in that regard, because they are showing they're a more versatile team. Is that why?
No, I don't think so. I think outside of Boxy, my versatility is actually fairly low on the team. I think Boxy can play like a huge amount of stuff and still perform up to par. I think Nisha can too. I think 33, you really want to figure out what he abuses the most in a meta and kind of jam it.
Yeah.
And I think Mickey is pretty similar. Like, I don't think you're going to have those two playing crazy shit and succeeding with it every game like a Yatoro TI run, right?
Yeah. You're picking Brewmaster, totally you're picking Doom, you're picking Razor, you're picking Monkey.
But I think for me, it's just how the game tempos looked and their ability to win in different ways and the team fighting mostly. I think for a long time, the team fighting was just all over the place between the 3 cores. Now it seems a lot more synced. So that I think was the biggest piece to figure out. I think they got there. They got there a little bit.
Okay.
They're not gonna beat Team Spirit, but you know, I mean, that's like, what can you do?
OG and 1win topped out the second group stage at scores of 6 and 1. 1win only losing to OG. OG only losing to Nouns. Those two teams. I want to know your opinion on 1win in particular because I have been quite impressed with this team.
They look better. I mean, I think we're seeing why they have shown some promise in that CIS region now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially the TI runs and stuff. It was like some of the teams I thought were going to do better, like VP and stuff, just bombed out. I think, if anything, it shows the depth of that region is probably greater than people give it credit for because 1win has looked pretty solid. They can play with some speed. These guys are pretty skilled. I think, yeah, they've definitely improved a lot over the last month. And the newer generation of CIS, as you would say,
that's
are
right.
Back, baby.
That's right.
The new generation.
They look good.
Until next week when there's another new generation.
It's not. They've qualified multiple tournaments at this point in time. We're going to see them at TI. Where do you think they'll place at TI?
They're really
Oh,
inexperienced. Right?
yeah. They're really inexperienced. So let's say, where do you think their ceiling is? Because they might choke and flop and whatever.
Top of the ceiling's probably top 6 to 8.
Yeah.
But realistically, I think that 9th to 12th, like the 9th to 12th is where they'll end up on average.
Sure.
Honestly, I think OG has looked pretty good with Cowrie. I think he's looked very good on that squad. I don't know if it's like a hero pool thing or whatever, but
a lot of Phoenix.
Yeah, a lot of Phoenix definitely helps. That's why I have that asterisk. But I think just like the team fights and stuff, they seem pretty synergized, which is a pretty good sign when you're that early into like a roster change like that, especially for someone as big as Seb.
Yeah.
And I know the team dynamics with that team were like a little weird with Seb playing with so many young dudes, and like he's this old veteran. He wants to play Dota how he wants to play. And well, how much of that do you balance with guys like,
Tomato and BZM, yeah. Like
these BZM guys who just want to play their Dota, and like they're not gonna go and maybe talk to Seb and be like, I don't want to do this, but they might just play their own way anyway. That's kind of hard to balance. So maybe Cowrie just fits with them better because now everybody's on more of an even field, right? You don't have this dynamic where one guy's just way above everybody else in terms of status and reputation and legacy and wins and all of this. It can create a weird dynamic, even if you are very experienced at controlling it. So maybe that'll actually help them more, I think. I mean, do they have to play with Seb at TI? Is that how that works?
Huh? They didn't make TI.
Oh, they didn't make it. That's right. I guess they're not playing with him at TI.
So that is like the big asterisk on that. It's
damn.
weird to talk about them because the TI TI is going to happen, and there's going to be some sort of TI shuffle. So we don't really know if like OG is, even if they win this tournament, right? It's like they may still not keep the same roster. So it's just weird to talk about them.
Yeah, it's weird. But
yeah, so
I guess
they're doing
they don't have
very
any
well.
pressure.
They've only dropped one series in the entire tournament so far. They've only dropped a few games, even if you count those up. But it's just like at the end of the day, they could win this tournament, and it still wouldn't matter that much because you don't have TI. So
that sucks, but
yeah,
still a fun team to watch. I like watching them.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather have more teams like them in Dota. They're like entertaining and kind of all over the place, but they just brawl. Brawl and
they just run at you, man. They just they are killers.
I like that
they
shit.
just run and look for kills nonstop. You don't look for objectives. They ain't got a game of gladiators. They run at you and find kills. Not any.
I like
objectives.
those kind of teams, man. I think that's where Dota's its best. So I actually enjoy watching that squad. I feel like their games are never boring, which maybe is not good if you're an OG fan, but for the rest of us, I think it's quite good. They almost remind me of Tundra a bit, because I think Tundra also plays like that. They're a little slower.
Sure.
Like they're a bit more methodical about it, but I think that they play the same way. Like Tundra just wants to run around and kill you at the end of the day,
Yeah.
That's like what this Thompson guy does. He wants to be like 15-0 every game, running around with some Pugna Invoker just dumping on you. Like the guy doesn't really care about taking objectives or playing the map, or like he does these things well, but the guy just wants to outskill you, outplay you, out-team fight you, outslay you. I feel like those two teams are kind of similar in that identity. And for me, they're fun to watch. Like, Pure is like that too. I think he's like a real killer carry. I like those kind of players. I think they make Dota exciting. I think they're entertaining. They have really high ceilings and really low floors, which makes for like crazy comebacks and throws and all these kind of things. I think those kind of teams and players are way better for the viewer experience than the more consistent teams.
Yeah.
Which obviously is maybe not good from a competitive standpoint, but as a viewer, it's like amazing. My viewer nightmare is this Game and Liquid matchup. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but one I think is because both teams are very consistent. So if one team is slightly better, which in grand finals most of the time it's Gaimin, they just like slightly outbeat them at everything every time and win. And like nothing about it ever changes. There's no like huge dynamic. It's not like Gaimin's suddenly going to throw the map, or Liquid's suddenly going to play like 10 times better in the laning phase. It's kind of just like the same thing every time because the teams are too consistent in what they do.
Yeah. Another two teams to talk about. I mean, Shopify Rebellion is there. They went 2-5 in this last group stage. I don't feel like we kind of already talked about them. Them playing with Bakaz and stuff. We'll see how they do in the playoffs. But I want to talk about another team that is.
They did not look good, by the way, just for the record.
Yeah.
I was watching them play, and I did not like how they were playing. It just felt like completely devoid of purpose in the moves and the fights and everything. Like I feel like I was watching a team without a captain, basically.
Yeah.
Like there was just no consistent, strong shot calling of getting everybody on the same page. Again, I go back to I still don't know where Picazza's English is, because when I tried to talk to him or ask people about him potentially playing on a U.S. team way back, people told me he just doesn't speak English at all. So I'm sure that's improved a little, but like it cannot be as good as like obviously Lullis, Tomato are completely fluent.
Yeah.
Maybe Whisper is like somewhere in the middle now, but I think he's still on the side of doesn't speak a huge amount. And I know Picaz has to be lower than that. So that's like, that is an issue. You can get away with it on some of these carries, but the rest of the team has to have like good shot callers. I don't know who is the shot caller on this Shopify team.
Yeah.
Who is it supposed to be?
I heard that Yopaj is pretty active in talking, but I would assume it's a combination of Yopaj and Skem.
It's got to be Skem. Like, honestly, it has to be.
Yeah. I mean, he is definitely the most veteran guy.
I don't know. The game just felt super non-purposeful in terms of how they're progressing the game and objectives and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
I was not impressed initially, but still have some decent time to get something cooking, I guess, since, well, they're not going to TI or anything anyway, so.
Yeah. And another team that's not going to TI alongside OG and Shopify, but is actually doing better than the counterpart that is going to TI is Boom. So Boom lost the, if you guys remember in the SA qualifier, it was Heroic, who are obviously the best team. They beat Beast Coast, and then Beast Coast played against Boom for the second slot from South America. And while Beast Coast did triumph 2-1, now in this tournament, they just played against each other, and it was a 2-0 to the favor of Boom. Boom has the better score right now. Beast Coast has bottomed out the group. Not to say that, like, I don't think they are... I feel like they still kind of look okay despite having a score of 1-6. They bottomed out the group. They lost to Boom specifically, and then they're actually going to play now in the playoffs against each other in the first round for elimination as well. So if Boom ends up beating Beast Coast there, that is going to be quite the blow for Beast Coast heading into TI. So unfortunate.
Bad matchup, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think Beast Coast has looked that bad. I feel like they've had their games, and they have a lot of potential. Very young guys.
They have their games, but they do not have their series, apparently, because they just cannot seem to win a
not.
series. Yeah.
Maybe just inconsistent in terms of the drafting, what they want to do strategically, but I think they have some decent players on that squad. I think that's an interesting team to see where those guys will end up in a year or two. That's how I see it. Sure. I don't know if that iteration or group of it will be successful, but I think there will be players from that Beast Coast squad that in a year or two are going to get poached or will just be good enough to lead like a different version of this squad with one or two different players to slightly successful. I think they're the new generation of SA. That's how I'll put it.
Fair enough. That's a good call.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah. Unless Boom eliminates them, in which case Boom maybe is the new generation.
No, Boom's Boom. That team's going to disband. They're always disbanding. That's all I've learned about Boom is that team is no matter who's on that roster, that org is just always disbanding.
Just a perpetual cycle of disbanding. I see. Well, that wraps up the two tournaments that are going on. There was some other news that is happening in the Dota 2 space, Avery. Somebody big's coming back. We lost RTZ to the Void. He's going to Europe. He's going to be playing some pubs and streaming. And
Team Secret RTZ?
Possibly he'll end up on a team at some point in time. But
yeah, Secret.
Hello. Yes, I am joining Secret. Yes, I was a business meeting with Puppy last night with some vodka and cigars, and it looks like it's happening.
We are getting a legend back into the esports scene. Saksa says that he is going to be looking for a team for next year. So if you guys
were talking about Eternal Envy, man, I was like, God damn, it's time to come out of retirement.
If you guys recall, Saksa, he left that Tundra squad due to general health issues, and seems like stress and stuff just wasn't working for him. So he stopped, and he's been away for a while, and now he's looking for his new team for next year. Obviously, there are plenty of teams who would love to have him. I guess the one thing about this guy is that he is notoriously picky about the teams that he joins, because he, like there was a period of time where he had like 3 different accounts in the top 5 or top 10 or whatever, right? And he was just grinding. He was just, I'm gonna bide my time. I'm gonna wait until I find a squad that is made for me. And he did eventually find that squad, and he won TI. So he's looking for it again. Any thoughts on who you think Soxa would be best to end up with?
He's a very picky player. I will say he only plays with the highest caliber of professionals. I will say that. Everybody can go do their research on who he's played with in the past, or at least taken a chance on.
Okay.
There are some teams I think would definitely play with him. I think there are a lot of the top tier teams. But the problem is they have 4s that they are very confident in.
Yeah, Liquid's not gonna drop Boxy.
You're not gonna lose
Gladiator's
Boxy.
not gonna drop Tofu.
Right. I think Falcons would play with him again in a heartbeat, but they're not gonna drop crit for him.
Sure.
I think the skill difference is not. I don't even think it's really there. I think they're both world-class 4s. You're not gaining or losing anything.
Yeah.
And Soxa still has like a health issue potential. We don't know exactly where that is. You're taking some risk on that when you bring him in your team. And, that squad got hurt by that in the past. So I don't know where they exactly be on that. Everything I know from them is they super value him and think he's a 10 out of 10 player. So, if Crit disappeared tomorrow or something, yeah, they'd probably play with him again, right? But that's not going to happen. So I think those 3 are locked out for him. You can't go to China. You're not going to go to C. You're not going to go to SA. You're not going to go to NA. So you're pretty much locked into maybe like the other MENA team, which would be like a PSG Quest, but I don't know if he has connections with those guys, or a European team. That's like the only thing you're considering here. And I don't really know if like European teams he'd be super interested in. I think it actually really depends on who he's friends with and who he knows, which I don't know enough about. Like, would he play with Puppy? Maybe. I think it could be interesting to him, but you'd have to fill out the rest of that squad with players he also likes and believes in. I don't know if that happens. Like, it could, but I don't think Secret is going to pay enough money to really coerce that anymore anyway. So it's kind of a weird situation. I don't really know where he'll end up. I could also see him just play on a team with like... Okay, so I think there's 2 likely outcomes. One is he decides he's okay just playing on a team of like a lower tier on paper that has lower pressure and lower expectations, but one he feels like he's like maybe the top dog on and can guide and build, in Europe. I think that could happen. The other possibility is that he gets another big player out of retirement, and that's enough to swing some good players to that squad. Like, let's say Soxa is building a team and suddenly got like Matumba Man back or something, right?
Sure, then like all bets are off. Like, you can...
Right. You might be able to poach some good dudes, right? Like,
yeah, but who's the big... Because it's not Matumba Man. It's not Zai.
I don't know. I mean, we don't know it's not Matumba Man. I've seen crazier things. How do you know it's not Matumba Man? You speak to Matumba Man?
Because my understanding is Matumba Man's settled into retirement.
Yeah, well, everybody's settled till they get a check at their door. So, we'll see. But I'm saying somebody like that,
I guess
right?
for me, it's just like my immediate assumption is Soxa ends up on a Tundra Cloud9 team. Like that team, keeps like 3 of their players and then shuffles. And then you add in Soxa and you add in one other guy, and then that's gonna be the new Western European, team trying to challenge the pre-established teams. Because right now, maybe TI is disastrous and like things really go to shit. But right now, it feels like Liquid, Game of Gladiators, Falcons, they're probably gonna be staying the same. I could see a world where like Bet Boom maybe blows up in some regards, and then that maybe sets some dominoes moving on some of these other teams, like Kennedy, or like Cloud9, like Tundra, like OG, But it feels like the top dogs, Spirit, Falcons, Game of Gladiators, Liquid, are pretty solid in their roster, and I cannot imagine them moving too much. And if they don't move very much, then that just means the rest of the scene has to kind of, in some ways, keep what they have. Like, I feel like you can't, maybe there's going to be a massive shuffle, but I just feel like if those big guys aren't available, then it just means it's less likely for more dramatic moves, you know?
I actually think there's a world Liquid gets him.
Okay.
I think Liquid would be the most likely of any tier 1 team. One, he has a past relationship with 33, and I doubt 33 leaves that roster.
Mm-hmm.
It would also bring some more leadership and shot calling and drafting and all of that into that squad, which, let's say Liquid has a mediocre TI run, right? They get like 4th to 6th, which is still good, but might, obviously that team wants to win, right?
Yeah.
They go into next year, like, are you content just running that same roster back again? Maybe not. I could see them, maybe not. I could see Boxy wants to retire and saying he wants to retire. I don't fucking know, right? Maybe that team is just like fed up with not winning anything for a super long time and they feel like they have to kick somebody to change something up. Doesn't mean you think like the player's bad, but sometimes like Dota teams eventually get to that point, right? When you don't win anything for a long time.
If you can't win, then usually there's some sort of, it's what Kuro did, right? Kuro, when he kicked Matama Man, he said basically that like we needed change. And like Matama Man was kind of like the man out, but he said it was nothing to do with like Matama Man being worse than the players or anything like that.
Exactly.
It's just like that kick was supposed to be to entice change into that roster.
So I could see a world where that happens. And I think Soxa would be a very interesting individual for that team because of what he brings to the table. Especially if especially if Boxy ends up wanting to take a break or something, which I know has potentially happened in the past. I'm not going to speak on him like retiring or something, but like let's say you lose Boxy on that team, then you really need someone like Soxa to come in who's like a shot calling with strong ideas,
sure,
to replace that hole, right? That would be the team that really needs him in that type of situation. But if that doesn't happen, then like, yeah, that team's they're not going to kick someone who isn't retiring or whatever just to get that guy. It's not a clear enough upgrade or like necessary move. But I could see something like that happening because of who's on their roster and what they would need. I think it's more likely for them than like a Gaiman or a Falcons or something, because I just don't like Falcons don't need the shot calling. They don't need the extra like playmaking, you know. I don't think Gaiman really needs Soxa's skill sets either. Like they just play the way they're going to play. They're going to push down objectives. It's like they already are winning all their lanes. Like, what do
yeah.
What do you gain in these situations? It's really marginal, and you're taking big risks. So
yeah. Also, I think duo of Ace Tofu is like, you know, they seem to be tied at the hip, so you're
no way you're
breaking
breaking
that part apart. Those guys
so,
are
yeah.
duo.
I think his options are going to be limited, but he's a very valuable player. If a team like an Entity or Cloud9 or one of these like on the cusp teams can fit him in, he's going to perform really well. He's going to be extremely consistent. He's going to give you a lot of knowledge. So it's going to be extremely tempting for teams in that position who are going to be very more willing to kick somebody. You know, like I think the Tundra Cloud9 teams of the world are likely changing people after TI anyway. Maybe one or two people, just natural. So yeah, I think that's where his opportunity lies.
All right. Well, then it is time for the question of the week. So last time we ran so long that we couldn't do a question. This time we do. So if you guys have a question for Avery and I and you want it answered on this show, drop it in the comments below. This week is going to be a question that I have in the process of it's been a different experience, like streaming a tournament and like doing more co-streaming than actual casting, because I'm just sitting there interacting with chat the entire time, and I get this question all the time about why don't teams ban X hero? And the hero right now is probably Tiny because everybody, you know, kind of agrees Crash Landing is a dumb ability. So Stupid Sega asks, question, explain to me why pro teams are letting a hero such as Tiny, who is clearly overtuned, through a draft. I feel like I saw this hero absolutely wreck playoffs and it's still getting through.
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you. Motherfucker.
Got him with that one. Okay, I think I mean, there's a lot of reasons you might. A lot of matchup dependent stuff, a lot of like meta stuff. But the easiest way I can explain, I think, with the largest motivating factors is that everything in a draft is a trade-off. It's not a 1-0 thing, it's a 1-1. So when you are giving away Tiny, you're getting something. If you're picking Tiny, you're giving something up. And when you are deciding what to leave in the pool rather than ban, it's all about the relative strength of that trade-off, not what the hero is in a vacuum. Like that's the important part you have to consider when drafting. If something is Omega broken, but you get something that is also Omega broken, right? Like, okay, let's say Tiny is at a 90 out of 100 power level in a vacuum, whatever the fuck that means. Dota's not that simple, but for the sake of this argument, we will simplify it. You know, some heroes are numbers-wise stronger than others. So that's all I'm talking about, but obviously these things are super matchup dependent. If Tiny is a 90 out of 100 hero in the current patch, and you trade that for an 85 out of 100 hero, that exchange is maybe not that bad, right?
Okay.
If you trade the 90 out of 100 Tiny for like the 60 out of 100 hero, it's fucking bad.
Yeah.
And you're losing the draft. But the way you're setting up these drafts and simulating them and going through these exchanges, that Tiny giveaway might put you on average in a better relative position than giving other heroes away, especially depending on what the enemy's banning. And depending on what you're confident in, or heroes you think have good matchups versus them, these kind of things, you know? Like, maybe for you, Chaos Knight is a 90 out of 100 hero. And maybe for the enemy, it's like a 50 out of 100. So you want to leave Chaos Knight in the pool, because it's way better for you than for the enemy. And the way you get to leave them in the pool is you leave Tiny so that they pick Tiny. You know, they take Tiny, you take CK. They get a 90 out of 100 hero, but maybe they only play it at 80. You get a 70 out of 100, but you can play it at 90. Relatively, you got like a plus 10 exchange in the team matchups, even if the hero to hero isn't like anything to walk home about. Those things matter a lot more, like deep LAN runs and stuff like that, than just the hero power in a vacuum. Because the hero power in a vacuum, it's like better in group stages, worse down the stretch. Because teams are way stronger, which means they can adjust faster, and they're better at playing the adjustments. So they can bust out heroes that always exist that have better matchups, you know? Like, people will start playing things like Undying that hasn't been played the whole tournament, and suddenly your 4-position Tiny disappears. And maybe now your Tiny has to deal with like a Tombstone and an unburstable support in the fight. And suddenly he used to be 90 and 100, and now he's like 75 out of 100. And this Undying's like 70, and you're like getting a +5 exchange versus a support. And you're like, oh, this is kind of ass. And then you devalue Tiny because you don't want to ban Undying. You know, like things like this happen.
And so even if
give you a better vacuum, it's good. It's not bad. Yeah.
If you give up the Tiny 90 out of 100 hero, but you know it's going to be mid, and then you get an 80 out of 100 hero, but that hero beats Tiny in the mid lane, right? Then all of a sudden, like, okay, maybe Tiny is broken, but if the hero is getting its ass beat in lane, like, it's still overtuned, but maybe it's manageable at that point in time, right?
Yeah, 100%. We saw that a lot. A lot of the top teams at EWC were willing to give Tiny because they knew it would go mid versus a team they're playing against, and they had a hero they were very confident putting there that would have a good game. We saw Quinn play Invoker that I think had some good games versus it in terms of just mana burning him out, keeping him low on resources, and maybe the CS isn't that relevant, but then Invoker can play the map a lot better while this Tiny's trying to farm a blink from a position where it's not that accelerated because he lost a lot of resources, right?
Yeah. I saw a couple of TAs. Different teams have tried TA mid where you just meld the Tiny. He just absolutely destroys him because he has no armor at the start, right? So
yeah. And the thing about this is when the enemy picks the Tiny, like everybody understands what it's doing. You're not going to get surprised by it. When you pick a counter, they might not know exactly what this counter does to it. They might not understand exactly what a TA or Invoker is going to do to Tiny at various points to shut him down, whereas you do, which means you gain a slight edge in that area, as well as if your hero does address what the Tiny does in certain aspects, then it forces them to have to adjust and deal with what you're proposing, you know, and suddenly you might have a very free TA game that Tiny does not solve. Now they have to solve this TA in the draft, and this Tiny becomes a liability. He loses more draft value. That number starts to go down. And this TA starts to go up. And now they have to address that, and you put them in that position. So even if the TA gets answered as well down the road, it frees up your later picks to cause more problems. And these are like the exchanges you're constantly battling They're very matchup dependent, very team dependent, very team matchup dependent. But in general, it's not always bad to give a broken hero away because it can put you in a good position down the road. But you have to be very smart about that. And it's very easy to fuck up because all these things go both ways. The team. So I think this is where good teams separate themselves from bad teams. Is I think a bad team will pick Tiny and then just assume the hero is going to be broken no matter what. A good team will pick Tiny, see how much the enemy commits to trying to shut different parts of him down. Like maybe they trying to get a good lane matchup and fuck him in the lane phase. Maybe they try and make the team fight impossible with like Phoenix Undying type heroes. Maybe they just like lane shove the shit out of him with like Darkseer Chaos Knight stuff and he can't play the pickoff game, right? There's a lot of different ways you can adjust to make his gameplay worse. The really good team is going to have reads on these things and then pick heroes that help Tiny overcome those. So he can still be broken. And that's the scary part of actually giving a strong hero to a really good team is you might not know exactly what they have in the tank to boost that hero even more. And I think this is what, for example, OG were ahead of versus a lot of teams historically and gave them a massive advantage in a lot of drafts. They are one of the teams that used buffers, healers, and accelerators way better than everybody else at the right points in the draft, right? Like they would first pick Ana's hero a lot of times. They would early pick Alchemists, for example, and then teams would pick, like Timber Saws or random shit, be like, we got the Alchemist answers. And then all of a sudden they'd throw like Omni Knight in there or something that just helps them go over the top of those.
Where they did like the Centaur, like they did Spectre and then Centaur, right? Where they were like stacking damage, damage resistance, right? It was just like, okay, you're actually just comboing shit that actually puts this hero over the top.
Or like the Invoker combinations too, like the Invoker Alacrity combinations. They play like Slark Invoker. Slark. Okay, you see Slark in the draft. We're gonna pick heroes that make him manageable. Bloodseeker, I don't know, whatever. But then what happens if this Slark has like Tether with Overcharge and a mech heal plus an Alacrity? Like suddenly your answer is just getting outfought, and you're like, oh fuck, That kind of stuff is like what a really good team can do and keep open and read as the draft progresses. And that's the scary part about broken heroes, to me at least. If you're really operating on all cylinders, is you can give a broken hero, you can get good exchanges, but the enemy in theory still has an opportunity to amplify what that hero does. And that is what makes an actual Dota strategy.
Okay.
Different than you just picking the broken heroes of the meta.
So there is I'm going to throw up a second question here because I think it slides nicely into this conversation. Shoryuepa asked a bit of an analytical one question for the boys. What's your mental process in determining who wins a draft and predicting what could come next? How do you analyze pick synergy / anti-synergy / counters? It seems like a Sisyphean task. The decision tree just blows out like crazy.
So, I mean, based on what we just talked about, it depends on the caliber of team you're watching. A lot of teams, the way they draft is they just look for answers to what the enemy is picking.
Some teams really focus on like, I just want the carry-to-carry matchup, and I want lanes. I want to be able to win.
Generally,
lanes, right? Like that's.
If you just think about that, you can predict 90% of most drafts in Dota because teams are not going beyond that. Certain teams have really big preferences, like the old EG was just always about lane matchups. I feel like I could predict 90% of their picks just because, like, which hero is the best lane matchup versus this and the best carry matchup in the game. And, like, you have RTZ's hero 90% of the time. Like, it really was that simple. They just prioritized it that much. Other teams were a lot more team fight dependent. Other teams were lane synergy dependent. Like, if you look at Gaming Gladiators, they're always going to, like, at EWC, they're always going to have an aura buyer for Ace. Quinn has his hero pool of, like, team fight initiators and damage dealers, and Dorachio's hero is always going to be a hero that can fight early, take an Aegis, and go high ground, right? And so these heroes are going to slot in there. They're always going to force them, and you just predict off that. You understand how teams are thinking about the game. You can get pretty good at predicting what type of hero they're going to pick and nail it down between 2 or 3 that do the same function. The stuff that's a lot harder is when you go very deep in a LAN and teams are actually playing and drafting well, and they have very good macro strategists. People like historically Zhao 8, Seb, Puppy, I think was pretty good at this. These guys have a lot of knowledge to draw back on. They've seen a lot of drafts. They know a lot of answers to things, and they can play the next level of the mind game of who's answering who and who has tricks up their sleeve to overcome the answers. And I think when you get teams like that deep in a tournament, it's a lot more exciting to see how the draft unfolds, and it's more difficult to predict. You might see stuff that you haven't seen because they've done it in scrims and are really confident in it. They might just pull answers out of nowhere. I think that's why the TI Grand Final was a really cool final, because you had Team Spirit versus LGD, who had very good thinkers on both sides, and people also thinkers who were willing to take risks because they understood the concept of why a hero could be strong, even if it's not something they had played. Like Zhao 8 understood he had to try and deal with this Magnus with high ground vision from Undying and Rubik instant lift to counter the horn toss, even though for some reason they didn't play around it in game 4. I still don't understand that. And you had Team Spirit who were willing to give one of the strongest strategies at the time, the Tiny Lycan strat. Again, this concept of Tiny's a really good carry, but how do you make him even more insane? You take this Lycan, you throw some of the best buffs on him of the entire patch and accelerate his game out of control. Very difficult to stop at that 30 to 40 minute mark. Spirit were willing to pick heroes that defended the towers, fought really well around that 30, 40 minute timing defensively, and then outscaled him. Terribly did outscale that combination. They were willing to take a risk on that hero, and Winter Wyvern was one of the best supports at the time at dealing with the pushes when it came and defending those towers and stalling out the game. And if you go and look at those drafts, they use those heroes to defeat that strategy, but it was the margin for error was very narrow in that game 5. It was a very risky thing to do, because the level of execution to pull that strategy off was very high in that situation, and they were willing to take that risk though, because they conceptually understood that the heroes in theory are good. I think that kind of drafting is much harder to predict, but also way more cool, because once you see it, it's like, you're playing on that level instead of just like, I like Timbersaw versus Alchemist. It's like, what do you fucking do, you know? Like, you're like, I feel like that's what happens a lot of times. It's like some team pick Alc, enemy team has counterpick, they pick Timbersaw. Alchemist goes to the lane versus Timbersaw. Timbersaw shits on his fucking ass, and then the game's over. And you're just sitting there like, where are the adjustments? Where's the game adjustments? Where's the lane dodging or the pseudo tri lane or the hero that pushes Alc over the top of Timber or these kind of things? I feel like they are missing in a lot of modern Dota. I don't know why. I don't know if it's teams not understanding it or not willing to take risks on it, or maybe a laziness, or maybe the meta is just not bounced enough where these things work. Like maybe teams are trying these things and they just consistently fail because heroes are just too overtuned, right? Like maybe there is no way to put this Alc over the top of Timber. I don't know. I'm not in these scrims, but I think that stuff is the cool part of Dota, and I don't know if we see it as much as I would like to see it.
It's fair enough. Can I give you my, like, when I look at a draft, can I tell you my 2-step process to determine who I think has won the draft? It's I just think about lanes, like thought process. I was just like, okay,
is this a stupid lanes and stuns thing?
No, I don't do the stuns thing. I do the other one, which is who wins in the team fight. Like I remember there became this mantra of like at some point in time you must win a team fight to win the game, right? And that's Dota has like kind of developed at that point where split pushing and that other sort of thing. So like team fight. So I just look at lanes and I look at team fight, and that's my 1-2. That's all I do in order to determine who I think won a draft. I keep it simple. I do not do the stun thing. Those stuns are a big part of team fights.
I actually think it's not true right now, that statement.
What, stuns are a big part of team fights?
No, that you have to win a fight to win the game. I think it's not true anymore. I actually think you don't. I think it was true for a super long time. There was definitely a period where you could not end a Dota game without winning the 5-on-5. I think now you actually can.
Are you talking about the Aura Death Ball? Because you are.
I mean, that's one way. That's one way. I mean, Death Ball is Death Ball. Like, if you can't answer Death Ball, you just lose. But Death Ball isn't really about the team fight. It's just about who gets there first.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's pretty hard to outplay a team fight versus Death Ball, honestly. Like, you can sometimes do it, but like, if you're just 5-manning into a team and they have pipe mech and you don't, like I just don't really care how good you are or how well you can execute. I feel like you're not supposed to win that fight with almost anything.
Yeah.
Like in the current state of the game. So to me, it's not even really about the fight. I think Deathball is way more about the lanes than the actual fight. Because that just determines who gets there first. And if you get there first and you can rush the objectives and build advantage, then you kind of just win.
Yes.
That's the whole point of Deathball.
Yeah.
The Deathball is really dependent on the laning phase. Which is why Game and Liquid are the best at it. They're just like some of the best laning teams in the world. They have really good laning mids. They generally don't lose the early game at worst. And a lot of times they can cheese you out of it or really win it hard.
So wait, what's the
Queen's
other part though? You said you don't think that's true, and then I said, well, is that because of Deathball?
So outside of that,
that's only part of it.
I actually don't think you have to win the fight to win the game anymore. I think you just have to win the economy.
Mm.
And then the fight just is over. Like
Sure.
the fight's not even a fight. You just literally, it's been like this for a long time. Like you just close the map and you just take third and fourth Roche. And if you get third and fourth Roche, the game's just over. Like that fight's not a fight, which is why I think a lot of the games feel very inevitable.
Mm.
Because I don't think you can lose a game if you get third and fourth Roche. Like you can always throw a Dota game, but on a certain level, you will always be up 20 to 25k net worth.
Don't you close out the map because you have the better team fight at that point in time, and you are bullying the enemy team with the fact that like, hey, we're stronger than you right now, and you're closing out the map, and then that advantage builds on that. The fact you have a team fight advantage builds an economic advantage, and then that gives you a Roshan advantage.
Because the map is way bigger, so like you actually. Like the way you close out the map is not by 5 manning, right? The way you close out the map is like
it's like 3-4 man smoke sweeping across map.
Yeah, you have a 3-man hit squad and you have 2 lane shovers. That's the standard setup.
Sure.
You have Darkseer, Chaos Knight shoving in waves. You're never gonna fucking gank these guys or kill them once the entire game. And you have some like Invoker or Tiny plus 2 supports that just kind of run around. And if you group up as 5, you don't run into them. And they lose lanes. And then they have to go and deal with lanes. And then that hit squad picks somebody off. It's not really a 5-on-5 team fight. Like you could take the 5-on-5, but it's actually disadvantaged. I think it's disadvantageous for that type of setup to take the 5-on-5. Because I think the enemy team is supposed to dodge. Like you come back more by farming the whole map while the enemy 5-mans than risking taking the fight unless you have really good timing. And then it's still a wrong move by the person who's in the lead. Like it's how Tundra kind of played the map and how they still play it a bit, to be honest. Or the old Tundra, the current Falcons. Like it's not about the 5-on-5. It's just you play the map until the opponent gets really frustrated and they feel like they have to fight their way back in the game. So they group up. And then the second they group, you basically won. Like if you make the correct decision at that point, you win. Because it either means you're just going to start gaining 1k net worth a minute because you just farm everything and they grouped up like morons. And if they 5-man smoke and kill a hero, who gives a shit? They lose so much on the map. Or they 5-man grouped and you're like, oh, well, we're just way stronger and we're going to destroy them. And so you just fight them and they lose.
Mm.
Like in theory, if you make the right decision, they just lose. You know, the second you get them in that position.
So in this theory, it's the team fight in that regard. It's the lane shove that is more important. And like your kill squad and how effective they are, and your lane shove. Like if you have better lane shove than the enemy, and your kill squad is just effective, right? It doesn't have to be better than the enemy. It's just as long as it's effective. Because if you have the better lane shove, the enemy team is going to have to split apart more, which means that your kill squad can go and find those kills.
Yeah, I think from a theory standpoint, like you almost always rather have that than the straight up better 5-on-5.
Mm.
Because I think you can always build a net worth lead with that, and eventually that net worth lead will just win you the game. Like there's very few teams in lineups that can function from down 20 to 25k net worth, regardless of what the heroes are. Yeah. It just doesn't matter anymore because too many heroes are too powerful with extra items. Like it's not like the 20k net worth is irrelevant because a lot of it's on your supports. Like these supports is like some hoodwink with fucking Daedalus. Like bitch, you're gonna get smacked, you know? Your gyro is not just gonna carry versus like these jacked up subs anymore. You know, it's not gonna happen. He's gonna get like 2-shot. Yeah. That's the biggest difference. So these teams that are really good at finding farm on everybody just rarely lose from that position. That's why I think like Falcons is just they just win so many games off this because they get farm on everybody and they're not afraid to just keep farming the map even when they get the enemy in a position where the enemy groups. Like they just shove out the waves. Skeeter just pushes the waves. Crit just pushes the waves. Snaking just farms jungle. You lose 5K net worth while you're like trying to look for that fight, or maybe you find one pick off on ATF. You do that for like 10 minutes, you just win. It's just economic victory, to use like a Civ term, you know. And then the fight just plays itself. Like you don't actually have to win the fight. I think it used to be like you look for the 5-on-5 and then like you really try and find that because there wasn't enough farm on the map. Like you'd farm everything and then you're just sitting there for 30 seconds. Like what the fuck do we do? You know, so you'd have it was more of this 4-on-1 setup where like you're kind of farming close or grouping as 4 and maybe the carry's farming the other side of the map and you want to find the fight that the carry can TP into. That was like what happened a lot on the old map. And then if you won that, you won the game. But now it's like, I don't need to fucking do that shit. Like I can literally just farm infinitely with 2 heroes all the time and they will never run out of camps or lane. And I can run around with the other 2 or 3. Why would I ever lose that formation, right? You break that formation, you lose net worth per minute. Just like, okay.
Okay, but
that then.
more importantly, who's getting the cultural victory?
Team Spirit. They've already won the cultural victory.
All right,
Give
well,
them the third Aegis.
That wraps up another episode of Not for Broadcast. If you have a suggestion on who is getting the cultural victory in Dota 2, let us know in the comments below. But also give us any questions that you have that you would like to answer on the show. We'll be back to wrap up the both the Chinese tournament as well as the Lima event that is going on right now on the next episode. We'll see you guys there. Goodbye.